Hello, everyone. My name is Tyler Colburn, and I am the professional development consultant here with the Nova Scotia College of Social Workers. You're here for our final professional development activity for the year. And we're joined with some really amazing people, Kate, Allison, Nicole, Chelsea, and Brooke, who are from Cape Breton University. And they're going to be leading us through a session on sensory reels, neurodivergence in the classroom. This comes out of a body of research around neurodivergence, and I'm really excited. As a queer neurodivergent weirdo myself, I'm excited to see what kind of lessons come out of this. A couple of things before we get started. The session is being recorded. So just so you're aware, we'll have a recording on this later on. There will be opportunities for small group discussions and engagement. And as we move towards that, I will turn the recording off. But for the presentation aspect of it, it will be recorded. Additionally, you don't have access to your microphones or cameras at this time, but we will enable those later. But you do have access to the chat, so please engage in that as we go through this. Do want to begin with a land acknowledgement, and I want to acknowledge that I'm in Guawageat, which is the Mi'kmaq name for Citadel Hill, or Big Pine Hill is what it was in Mi'kmaq. And we are located in what is colonially known as Halifax, and it's located on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. And it's important to acknowledge that the inherent rights of the Mi'kmaq were recognized in the peace and friendship treaties signed with the Mi'kmaq, Maliseet, and Passamaquoddy peoples from 1725 to 1779. This series of treaties did not surrender Indigenous land, resources, or sovereignty to the British Empire, but instead established rules for an ongoing relationship between nations. I'd argue as a nation state, the colonial nation state of Canada, we do a very terrible job of upholding treaty rights and nation-to-nation relationships with Indigenous folks and Indigenous nations, and it's important to recognize that this is unceded territory. Canada later reaffirmed the treaties in Section 35 of the Constitution Act of 1982, and they remain active to this day. So as we think about land acknowledgements and hopefully striving towards support and solidarity for Indigenous resistance and resurgence and decolonization, for many folks, settlers like myself especially, it can be helpful to consider the ways that we are expressions of nature. With settler colonialism and white supremacy, we're often fed, or in capitalism, we're often fed this idea that we're here to dominate and have ownership and exploitation over the land. But if we flip it and understand that we are expressions of nature, it can help us maybe reinvigorate our understanding of what it means to acknowledge the land and work in solidarity with Indigenous peoples. And I love this quote from Gesturing Towards Decolonial Futures that says, "Understand that the earth is not an extension of our bodies, it's the other way around." So as we acknowledge the land, I think it's also important to take a moment to pause in gratitude for all who have and continue to heroically care and advocate for this beautiful land. May we join them in this sacred work. Specifically right now, I've been thinking a lot about the people out in Fairy Creek out in BC, thinking about the people engaged in resistance and resurgence at Hunter's Mountain in Umagi, thinking a lot about the land defenders and water protectors engaged in resistance here, throughout Turtle Island, and around the world. Anywhere you look in the world where there's a population of Indigenous people, they're working in resistance to colonial powers. It's important to ground ourselves also in the wisdom of the land-based Mi'kmaq teachings and values that we must all begin to learn. Let us work to decolonize ourselves, our practice, and this community that we share by working for justice for all living beings as an expression of our gratitude for being here. Let us take a deep breath and recenter ourselves away from the violent ways colonization fills our world and fills us. And with this one in particular, thinking about neurodivergence and the concept of neurodivergence and the way that ableism and many forms of oppression are directly related to the forces of settler colonialism, white supremacy, capitalism, etc. And that's the dominance in these forces is what constructs the oppression related to neurodivergence. So holding on to that awareness as we move through this session. And then finally, let us take a deep breath and work on letting go of the unconscious bias that is everywhere inside and out. So hopefully our session today helps us to be in the right relationship with this land and with one another. I'm going to post some links in the chat and also some prompts for a check-in. Would love to hear where folks are calling in from, what's on your mind today as we start this session. Go. And again, you do have access to the chat, so please engage in it if you can. Just want to double check that that's enabled for folks. It is. Okay. So yeah, so check in. Let us know how you're arriving, the land that you're on, and anything that you might be curious about today. A reminder that we're all treaty people. So as we think about treaty accountabilities, I'm thinking specifically as a white settler of, Irish ancestry. How does this impact what I do and how I do it? And how is it going to guide the work that I do today and then going forward? So invite you folks to also be considering these things. And for us at the college, we're thinking specifically about the Truth and Reconciliation's calls to action specific to regulators. And so for us, as we offer PD, it's not just about learning, it's also about unlearning and deconstructing and unpacking the dominance that is, central within social work practice and education. Alongside, but distinct and separate, is our commitment to reparations for people of African descent. I say alongside, but distinct and separate in that the forces of settler colonialism are entangled with the forces of white supremacy that led to the enslavement and displacement of people of African descent. And so here at the college, we're committed to reparations for people of African descent. And one of the links I put in there is to our new Code of Ethics and Standards of Practice. We do have commitment statements in there in decolonization and reparation. And for us, it looks like 5 things: restitution, compensation, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and then guarantees of non-repetition. And the one I want to highlight today is thinking about the guarantees of non-repetition. So working towards preventing future human rights violations through awareness and education. So as social workers, we have an accountability and an obligation to be supporting people of African descent towards, social justice and liberation, anti-oppressive practices. And as we're thinking about people of African descent, we're thinking specifically to the folks, in those distinct African Nova Scotian communities, the 52 across the province, who have connections to the Black Loyalists, the Maroons, and the Southern American Black refugees. And within this, we think about not just their, contributions to the cultural landscape, but also the political and economic as well. And all that comes together in this idea, and this is presented from Ubuntu-centered practice. But she says, because we deserve a society built for us all, without othering, minoritizing, or pushing anyone to the margins of oppression, I stand for anti-oppressive practice, intersectionality, equity, and every path that fosters collective liberation and communal wellness. Anti-oppressive practice is inherently intersectional, resisting all isms and inequities at the micro, meso, and macro levels. We get free together, united as one family. Let's resist and rebel against divide and conquer tactics. So as we think about decolonization, reparations, and our calls to action and our code of ethics, we're really thinking about what is going to move us towards liberation and how do social workers contribute to this. Quickly, I'll just say a couple of more things. This session today is professional development. We are in renewal season, so for social workers on the call, you can track this under anti-discriminatory practice or formal professional development. And of course, this is grounded in our code of ethics. All of our content is, and it was really on value 1, respecting the dignity and worth of all people; value 2, promoting social justice; value 4, valuing human relationships; and then finally, value 7, providing culturally responsive, competent professional services. So there's going to be insights and lessons to working with folks with neurodivergence who are, on a vast spectrum of neurodivergence, and hopefully there'll be some lessons that you can apply in your practice. I am going to stop sharing. I'm going to pass it over to Brooke, who will be able to share. And thanks, folks, for checking in on the chat. I really appreciate it. And Brooke, just so you're aware, I will be here. I'm going to go off camera so it can be your faces profiled. But if you need anything at all, just send me a message or just say my name.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tyler. And thank you for that wonderful introduction. And hello, everybody. Welcome to Sensory Reels. So our original research project was focused on understanding the experiences of neurodivergent students in classroom environments. But as we realized, our findings actually can apply to so many different environments across the social work spectrum of jobs, right? So we'd like to kind of take the findings and then have you think about some things throughout, which you will find out. So it's really about imagining therapeutic social work practice environments for people with neurodivergence or neurodivergent people. We have Dr. Allison Whitner joining us from Cape Breton University. I am Brooke Collicutt, social work candidate currently. We have Nicole and Kate, who are going to be graduating from their social work degree very, very soon. Officially done now, however, I believe. And Chelsea Butler, who has a master's of social work, is a registered social worker working in private practice. Alrighty.
Thanks, Brooke. And thank you so much Tyler, for really setting the stage and thinking about how our concepts of what is cognitively normal versus what is divergent or neurodivergent is very deeply rooted in colonial ideas and Eurocentric understandings of how body mind should operate in this world. Myself, I dreamed up this project as a neurodivergent social work researcher who currently teaches in classrooms that I know very well are not um, are not designed and operated with the understanding of how diverse body minds might need to be supported or even comfortable. So all of us on this research team, some individuals who are here today, some who are not, and I'm really grateful that we have the opportunity to bring Nicole and Kate in on this. Kate doesn't mind me saying this, but she was also one of the collaborators in the research project. And it's also just been a wonderful field education opportunity having you both this semester with us. So the research that we're going to share right now was co-created with neurodivergent students at Cape Breton University, and everybody on the research team also identifies as having some form of neurospice. So I hope listening to this and learning about these diverse experiences will help inform your social work practice with neurodivergent individuals.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So I'm Nicole, and as I was introduced, Kate and I are finishing, we just finished our Bachelor of Social Work. So we are currently looking for work in the field. So I just, I also am neurodivergent myself. But before I share my story, I just want to give everyone a moment to reflect and think about, what do you know of neurodivergence and how it shows up in your practice? There's no right or wrong answer. I'm just going to give you about a minute. And if anyone feels comfortable sharing their reflection in the chat, please do.
Thanks for everyone for sharing in the chat. I'm seeing a lot of sharing about why it's so important to know what is going on and how our body minds might be different from both the systems that are there and as well as in how different people might need support.
And I just want to say I agree. I'm kind of like how Tyler shared. I was later finding out what kind of was going on with how my learning. It was in my early 30s when I went back to university, but I knew that neurodivergence showed up in my life long before I knew what was going on. So just to share a quick little story. So in high school, my favorite course was math, and I did really great on one-on-one tutoring. But the minute it came a test in a busy classroom, I barely passed. So I was very nervous. I had to do two maths as my core going to university. And the same thing happened. So the situation was the class was small, it was crowded. The professor during my first midterm was walking up and down the aisles, and I just remember completely blanking out. Um, and in that moment, I didn't complete the exam. I wrote on the exam that I'm dropping this course, and I handed it in and I cried in my car thinking like I wasn't smart enough for university, but I pushed myself. So as I continued later on, I did connect with the Jennifer Keeping Center at Cape Breton University and learned that the way my brain handles pressure and sensory overload was different. So they gave me a situation where they gave me a quiet cubby, earplugs, and a little bit like more time. I still had a timer, but it was very flexible. And so I did wait to take that stats course when I absolutely had to because I was so scared. And I still have the exam because I scored 100. And it just kind of made me realize what was really going on. And the point is not the mark. It's just a reminder that nothing about my ability changed. It was just the environment. Um, and just talking on neurodivergence, it recognizes that brains work in different ways, how we learn, process information, manage sensory input, focus, and respond emotionally. So it moves away from the idea of one normal way to think or behave. So conditions like ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyscalculia, and dyspraxia, Tourette's, and acquired neurodiversity, they all come with a mix of strengths and challenges. So some people have big strengths in creativity, pattern recognition, or deep focus, while others deal with things like sensory overload or test anxiety.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself there, and I shut my camera off. So I'm going to talk about some of the ways that neurodivergence can express itself. Keep in mind, this isn't for this. It doesn't apply to everybody. It just depends on your neurospiciness, whatever category you fit in. So there can be communication differences. So neurodivergent communication often involves direct language. My husband is on the autism spectrum, so most people who don't realize he is might call him just very honest. There's different facial expressions and body language, such as low affect display, minimal eye contact, processing time might be different. So for me, myself, I have ADHD. I might hear somebody, like physically hear it, but not actually understand it for a minute. So I'll say, "What?" And then as they start to repeat themselves, I reply to whatever they said. No small talk. So they might just focus on their topic of interest, just not asking about the weather. Social hierarchy can be irrelevant. So an authority figure might be treated the same way as everybody else. There's also sensory differences. So many neurodivergent persons have different sensory integration and processing systems. So that's how our nervous system receives information from our senses. And the physical world isn't designed to respond to sensory processing differences. So the impact that this has is that there's a mismatch between the world and our needs. And these are significant factors in neurodivergent people experiencing anxiety and depression. And it can impede executive functioning, or, like Nicole mentioned, ability to learn.
Thanks, Kate. So this is a quote that I think about quite a bit in relationship to this work. It's by Sarah Ahmed, who's a critical feminist theorist. And she writes extensively this kind of around thinking about how our material world shape our sociality and our experiences of the world. Saying to wonder about how it is that we come to inhabit spaces as if they extend our skin. And so I would encourage everybody on this call today within social work to expand and consider how we can expand our understandings of our practice beyond the mere sociality that is the current primary focus of social work practice, and really think about how the material world of your practice can really impact the internal experiences of both yourself, but also your clients that you're working with. And one way that I will posit how we can do this within social work is we have a disciplinary focus on social justice. So that is very much baked into all of our social work curriculum. And also, just even looking at the different areas of professional practice and what you said at the beginning, Tyler, about how this fits under the professional development of anti-discriminatory practice. So we're really, as a discipline, we're really focused on social justice, which is the equitable participation of all people in society. And it's really important to understand that this needs to be intentional and that society is constructed to meet everyone's needs. But under that umbrella, to achieve social justice, we need to look at spatial justice, which just understands that for social justice to occur, we also have to take a look at the physical world, because the physical and material world is interrelated and entangled with the sociality of our world. And there's a lot of knowledge that the physical world impacts belonging, identity, and wellness across diverse communities. And then also underneath the umbrella of social justice, it's important to understand disability justice. And the goal of that is to dismantle systems that perpetuate inequities among disabled people because of merely differences of bodies and minds. It's all socially constructed, and disability is really ableism is perpetuated through stigma and how we construct our environments. And built environments serve as litmus tests of broader social exclusions. So we can think about people experience ableism because that's a choice that we've decided to perpetuate both across sociality as well as materiality.
Okay, so currently post-secondary classrooms are not sensory inclusive. In fact, we still have a lack of research that delves into understanding what a sensory inclusive classroom even looks like and the impacts it has on students. This gap in research and practical implementation has major implications for neurodivergent students. When classrooms are overwhelming, unpredictable, or not designed with sensory needs in mind, neurodivergent students can experience a disruption in their learning, their social life, and overall well-being. In my private practice, I specialize in neurodivergence and chronic illness, and often what I see is a cycle that happens in neurodivergent students and workers or the general neurodivergent population. It starts with a lack of accommodation and or their sensory needs not being met. We then see often anxiety and rejection sensitivity show up. Then I often hear self-beliefs such as, I'm not good enough, I don't belong. And then that can sometimes escalate to, they would be better off without me, or I'm a burden, and so on and so forth. I often see neurodivergent students isolate themselves so that they don't have to sit through the uncomfortable classes where their sensory needs are not being met or face rejection from their instructors or peers. This often has implications on the social life and academic performance, as we can see. When we are in a heightened emotional state, it's extremely difficult for us to access the part of the brain that's used for learning and comprehending. Neurodivergent students have to suffer because classrooms are designed without neurodivergence and sensory needs in mind. And so ultimately, to fill this gap, we designed a research project that asks, how do neurodivergent students explain their sensory experiences in post-secondary classroom environments?
So just a little note on what cell films are. So cell films help bring documentary filmmaking to everyday life. So people film their stories using either a phone or a tablet, and this helps highlight voices that might otherwise go unheard. It's a form of community-based knowledge production and advocacy, and it's a 9-step process. So first is understanding the guiding question. So I was a participant in this, and obviously I don't mind saying that. So at the time, Brooke was the team member who supported me throughout that. So she asked me, like, what is neurodivergence to you? And that kind of started the conversation. From there, there's brainstorming. So what would you like your film to look like? And that's kind of based off of, what does neurodivergence mean and in the classroom for you. So sharing sound and film techniques. So Brooke told me different ways that we kind of make the vision come to life. There's ethics, so that's your usual, like informed consent. You can drop out whenever you choose. If you choose you don't want to participate anymore. Storyboarding, so you can do this typically with written words, or you can draw pictures of showing like each step by step that you want to do, like each scene, I suppose, in your film. Editing, that was on Brooke's end, so she would edit the video, send it to me, and confirm that it appropriately represented what I wanted to show. Archiving is just how you choose to store your footage, and then there's the dissemination of the information. So who are we showing this to, and how are we showing it? Is it going to be showing, like in this case, at CBU, or are we going to show this to legislature? Depending on the context of your project.
Alrighty. So with everything in mind that we've been kind of chatting about for neurodivergence needs and body mind so far, we also wanted to adapt the research process to make it more sensory inclusive across the board, right? Because those 9 steps can be a lot for a lot of people. So during the brainstorming phase, we included a guided body scan meditation, visualization of a classroom activity, and some arts-based mind mapping, just to help those neurodivergent individuals kind of connect with the sensory experiences that they may have been kind of pushing away or pushing down in their body, just to kind of connect them with those and kind of bring them into the here and now as well. And then for storyboarding, which is typically you fill out the boxes with what you want to see in this scene, and maybe you write down like a few words. It wasn't it wasn't the greatest process for us. So we also adjusted to include options for storyboarding that included art if they wanted to kind of create an art piece that reflected more so what they wanted to share through their film, that was okay. They were able to write it down completely, whatever they wanted to do per scene. Verbal only was more of a dialogue. Like the collaborators would talk to us. I was a research assistant at that point, and just be like, I think this is what I want, or I'm thinking about this. Like I'm kind of seeing this idea, but I don't know how to do it. So it was kind of a back and forth dialogue. And then for the final one, we also had a hands-on or an in-environment option. So that's where we were in maybe the CBU classroom that they had visualized earlier, or a CBU classroom that they really, really hated. So we went in, and just being in that environment also allowed them to be like, okay, this is what I know I want to show now that I'm in here, looking around, walking in through that threshold once more. So all of the collaborators ended up creating a cell film, right? That was our main research process, was going through this with everybody. And what we've done since is we have had an amazing person named Mihaela, who works out of Alberta, Quick Draw Society, and she has put it all together for us in a 6.5 minute video, and that is what I'm going to play next. Please let me know if you can't hear the sound. I think you should be able to, but if you can't, let me know.
Maybe it'll be okay. I'm just gonna hope for the best.
So I've watched the video a few times in all of the individual pieces, and every time I watch it, I am struck by the intensity of the experiences and also just the overall level of distress that we are subjecting neurodivergent individuals to, both within classroom environments, but across our world and culture. So I wanted, if I'm wondering, how do individuals here as social work practitioners, if people have ideas of how can we embed cross neurotype humility and environmental awareness into our practice. And I would just encourage everyone to think about that for a minute. And I'll give you a chance to put your ideas and your reflections about this into the chat box. Thanks, Tess. I'm going to talk about trauma-informed spaces, I think, on the next slide. Okay. Why don't we? So, oh, there's one more, Francesca. Yeah. Both meeting each other, because that's part of the neurodivergence, is understanding that we're all very different and have very different needs. Well, that's great what everyone is sharing in here. So thank you for reflecting and considering and sharing that. As Tess mentioned, there are kind of three different umbrellas that we can think about where neurodivergent needs and spaces can also intersect. So, and that's within thinking about the design of therapeutic spaces. And these are different ways of thinking, how can we intentionally design support for individuals into the material world? So this can be restorative environments. There's a lot of research and work on this, which is really about focusing how do we create spaces that allow different body minds to restore. It's situated under the attention restoration theory. So thinking about when people are really stressed, experiencing a lot of dysregulation, how can we create an environment that just allows their mind bodies to restore? Biophilic design understands that even though, as hard as we have tried under European paradigms of the world to separate ourselves from the rest of the world and the rest of nature, we are part of it all. And so thinking about how can we bring in nature into our environments to facilitate wellness based on that understanding. And then also trauma-informed design. That is gaining ground right now as a design interpretation or facilitation of how do we take trauma-informed care and practice and then embed those principles into how we design environments. So an example of that, I mean, it is allowing people to retreat from what would be called adverse sensory stimuli, a lot of which we saw in the video. But there's other aspects as well, bringing in nature, making sure that people have safety, security, agency, and choice in their built environment. So there's lots of different ways we can go about thinking about this and facilitating it in our social work practice.
So we're going to ask you folks to imagine what therapeutic social work practice environment would involve to support neurodivergent needs. So in a breakout room, we're going to have you guys grab a pen. Sorry, I'm trying to remove guys from my vocabulary. That's very gendered. You folks, grab a pen and use words or artwork to brainstorm a neurodivergent inclusive social environment. Also, just a quick note to the image that we have, which is really beautiful. It's one of my favorites. It's an image that is an example of a neurodivergent sex working space, and it's from a different project. So yeah, just letting you guys know that. And keep in mind, it doesn't have to be perfect. So if you do want to use some kind of artwork, absolutely do that. Like Tyler mentioned, perfectionism is a colonial ideal. And yeah, also, like, don't limit yourselves. Your imagination is not crushed by funding. So use whatever your imagination takes you to, okay?
Mm-hmm. And this would normally be the point of like when I'm teaching where, students just peace out because they, might not necessarily want to have to create or share. So I recognize that, but I really want to just give you a chance to think about this with other social workers and what this might look like in your practice. And it's just simply a brainstorming activity. So then you can come back and have a little chat about it. So I have created 4 breakout rooms. People are going to go into them, be assigned automatically, and I'm going to set the timer. So you're going to come back just after 6 minutes. It's just a quick chat and see then when we come back if what ideas people have about how you can really think about either implementing to ameliorate or address some of the issues that you saw in the video that could show up in your work, or really anything else about the sensory environment or otherwise in your practice. So I am going to automatically move you all. So because I am choosing power over for this. So
Choosing power over.
I'm choosing power over just for this.
And also, I just want to say quickly
Yeah,
for anyone who's watching
yeah,
this online later on,
yeah,
take a pause and spend some time with yourself to like think about this as well. With that, I am going to
absolutely.
pause the recording.
Yeah.
Tyler. Thank you everyone for participating. I hope you all had the chance to have a great discussion about how you would design your social workspace and or environment with the client sensory needs in mind. I invite each group to share what they discussed. If you don't feel comfortable speaking, the chat function is open for use, as Tyler mentioned. Otherwise, you can raise your hand or you can just unmute yourself to share.
Hi, I don't know if anybody can hear me. I'm
Yes, I can hear you,
Kelly.
Kelly.
Great, thanks. I'm from group 3. So we had a pretty good little conversation about what space for neurodiverse people could look like. We talked about maybe having access to equipment that would help people feel more comfortable in the space, like noise canceling headphones. We talked about soft lighting as opposed to fluorescent lighting, which government buildings often are the default. We talked about having access to additional space where people could go when they feel overwhelmed in the space that they're occupying. And we talked about just having the ability for people to participate, share verbally or non-verbally, as much or as little as they wanted. So the ability to just meet where you are, share what you're comfortable with. Those were the main ideas that we had come up with. I'm not sure if anybody else in group 3 wants to add anything else, but I will turn it over to my lovely chat partners.
That sounds wonderful. It sounds like a flexible space where you can be curious with the client or with the folks that you're working with and ask them what feels right for you. Having those headphones if they want them. If not, that's okay. You don't have to. What kind of lighting would feel best for you? Just being that curious social worker that we're all meant to be. Thank you for sharing.
No problem. Looking forward to hearing what other people chatted about as well.
Yes. Feel free to unmute yourselves or chat. The chat's open as well if you don't feel comfortable.
I just had a quick question, if it's
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah,
Are
absolutely.
these pictures ones that were pulled in from other chat rooms?
Oh,
No?
that would be a great idea if anybody did create pictures. This was actually a video, or sorry, this was part of the art space visualization of
Okay.
all the photos on here. This was participant created.
I love this. This is wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, we can partly further into practice and our classroom applications. We would definitely be open to that. And I just maybe as a way to end this, because in my perspective, research needs to be, research is there to be translated into social action. And so we've applied for funding to create a sensory supportive space at Cape Breton University. And would very much, we have ongoing research and community action into taking this research and applying it. So we're always happy to do a part 2. And thanks to everybody for coming in and thinking deeply and sharing your experiences.
Yeah, and I'd just
Okay.
love to be able to share my screen if I could.
Mhm.
Yeah. And also many kudos to Kate, Brooke, Allison, Chelsea, and Nicole. I do want to say on recording that working with these folks is also super easy and lovely, and it's really encouraging to see research coming out of Cape Breton University as well, because thinking about the social work program there, it's relatively new, and so it's only the first couple cohorts who've graduated, but there's some cool things happening at Cape Breton University. So if you haven't engaged with them or haven't looked up some of the work that they're doing, please do. And just to quickly share my screen, love to hear from folks around evaluations. If you have any feedback or reflections from the content shared today, please do them in the evaluation form. I posted the link in the chat. Other than that, I want to point to some things that are coming up in the new year. It is renewal time, so please get your renewals done. I always encourage people to get them done before the holidays if you can, but you have until January 31st. And I want to point to some of our upcoming activities. I do hope that these folks can come back and maybe do a deeper dive on neurodivergence and what that looks like in practice. And we have a couple other ideas for coming out of research at a CBU that we're going to be planning for in the year as well. And then in February, when we start our PD again, we're starting with a session out of research from Dalhousie addressing rural and isolated family violence. Then we're going to be starting one of our first of 4 sessions on parenting and decision-making assessment guidelines with Robert Wright. February 12th, we're going to do acceptance and commitment therapy for body image as a webinar. And then on February 19th, we're doing a webinar in partnership with PREV, I think they're called, Prevention of Social Polarization and Extremism, which I'm really excited for. With that, I hope you all have a good rest of the week and that you have things to look forward to. This is our last PD session for the year, which is bananas, but here we are. But take care and see you in the new year.